Today, we're diving into a book that truly became a global phenomenon, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Now, its subtitle, An Antidote to Chaos, that's a pretty bold promise, right? In this explainer, we're going to distill the core philosophy behind that promise and figure out what it really means to find some order in our chaotic world.
So right off the bat, the book tackles a pretty big paradox. I mean, our world already feels so full of restrictions and complications, so why on earth would we need more rules? Most of us think freedom is about having no rules, but the central argument here flips that whole idea on its head, suggesting that maybe our modern idea of freedom is all wrong.
The book's argument is this. Without some kind of guiding structure, we don't actually get real freedom. We just become slaves to our own impulses and whims. So this is the core idea we're starting with. Rules aren't just about limiting you. They might just be the very thing that makes genuine freedom possible in the first place. Okay, so the problem with no rules. Why are these rules supposed to be so necessary right now? Well, the book kicks things off by diagnosing a modern problem. It basically says we're living in a time of deep moral confusion, where all the old structures that gave our lives meaning have started to crumble, leaving this big empty space.
And this confusion, the book suggests, comes from an idea called moral relativism. You've probably heard of it. It's this belief that there's no real objective good, which means it's pretty much impossible to make any solid judgments about the right way to live. When nothing is really right or wrong, the only thing left to do is, well, just tolerate everything without judgment.
So what happens when you can't make judgments about what's good? You get a vacuum of meaning. And this void, the book argues, doesn't lead to freedom and happiness. Nope, it leads to nihilism, this feeling that life is meaningless, and a deep sense of despair. This is the chaos that the rules are supposed to be an antidote for.
Okay, so if we're in this modern void, how do we get out? The book introduces this really powerful framework for understanding reality itself, a fundamental duality that it claims has been at the heart of human stories for thousands of years. So existence is presented as this constant dance between chaos and order. Order is the world we get, our societies, our rules, the things we understand. Chaos is the unknown. It's all the unexplored potential, the place where new and unexpected things happen. We are always living right on the edge between these two realities, and a meaningful life is all about finding that perfect balance.
Now, to bring this big philosophical idea down to earth, the book takes a turn you might not expect. It looks at the lobster. I know, right? The argument is that the lobster's nervous system, which has been dealing with social hierarchies for over 350 million years, can tell us something really fundamental about our own brains.
You see, lobster life is all about hierarchy. The winners, they get the best territory, the best food, the best mates, and their brains get flooded with serotonin, which makes them confident, they puff themselves up. The losers get low serotonin, leading to stress, and they kind of slouch and hide. And here's the kicker. This isn't just about crustaceans. It's a window into the ancient software that's also running in our own heads.
So this isn't just a fun fact about lobsters. There's an ancient part of your brain that's constantly sizing up your social status based on how people treat you. If it thinks you're low on the totem pole, it dials back the serotonin. And that makes you more anxious, more stressed, because hey, when you're at the bottom of the pile, you have to be ready for an emergency at any moment.
So, what happens when we do feel defeated by life, when we fail to face that chaos we talked about? Well, this leads us right into the next big concept, this corrosive, heavy thing called resentment. Now, here's where the book kind of flips a common idea upside down. It argues that failure doesn't need an explanation. Failure is the default setting. It's way easier to not care, to not try, to just let things fall apart. The real mystery, the thing that actually needs explaining, is why anyone bothers to do the hard work of being a good person and achieving something.
And to dodge that hard path, people often adopt what the book calls a life lie. This is basically a form of self-deception. It's the story you tell yourself, usually one where you're the victim, to justify not taking responsibility, to avoid conflict, and to avoid doing the hard work of actually changing your life.
To show us the opposite of the life lie, the book brings up the incredibly powerful example of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Here's a guy imprisoned in a brutal Soviet labor camp. I mean, if anyone had a reason to feel like a victim of a cruel world, it was him. But he chose a completely different path.
In the absolute misery of the Gulag, Solzhenitsyn looked inward. He went back over his whole life, asking himself how he had personally played a part in his own downfall. Where had he lied? Where had he acted against his own conscience?
And this illustrates a core belief in the book, that taking personal responsibility, even when things are terrible, is the only way out of the poison of resentment.
Okay, so this brings us to the core prescription of the book. If all this chaos, resentment, and self-deception are the problem, what's the antidote? Well, the answer is both incredibly simple and incredibly difficult.
The book leans heavily on this famous insight from the philosopher Nietzsche. The idea is that suffering is just part of the deal of being alive. You can't escape it. So the only real defense against it isn't trying to avoid it, but finding a why, a meaning that's powerful enough to help you endure anyhow.
So how do you find this meaning? The book lays out a clear, though definitely not easy path. It starts with adopting as much responsibility as you can possibly handle. Then, it calls for a radical commitment to telling the truth, especially to yourself. And finally, you have to actively work to repair what's broken, in your own life and in the world right in front of you.
The real transformative power here is in telling the truth. The book argues that when you stop saying things that make you feel weak and ashamed inside, and instead start speaking honestly, your head just clears up. Your whole experience of the world actually gets better, and you start to become a more complete, more solid person.
And this is really the ultimate takeaway, the heart of it all. A meaningful life isn't a life without pain or struggle. It's a life where you choose to voluntarily confront the unknown, to shoulder a burden, and to face challenges head-on. That, the book argues, is where you find the true antidote to chaos.
So in the end, the book turns its central challenge right back onto you, the reader. After all this exploration, the final question isn't some abstract philosophical puzzle. It's deeply personal. And while it might be the hardest question to answer, it's also presented as the most important one. What truth are you avoiding?